Elon Musk recently gave an interview where he described AI future in the most optimistic way. You know, a world of radical abundance where food and objects and goods are so accessible and so affordable that work becomes optional. There is universal basic income. There is no need to grind. The promise of a life finally fully free. And yet, the thing is, we have never seen so much anxiety or so much depression, so much fear of the future. So how do you explain that? How do you possibly explain a generation being handed the promise of paradise and responding with dread? Well, this is what I think. Something that I haven't heard the tech world entertains. The AI revolution is not a technical revolution. It is a spiritual one. Now, I know that some of you are thinking right now, okay, here we go. But stay with me, because I'm not talking about religion or mysticism or anything that requires you to believe in something invisible. I am talking about something very concrete, something you have all felt, something you already know. Maybe I can explain it like that. AI is replacing what humans have learned to do. It does it faster, more efficiently, without mistake, and it keeps getting better. And that part, we all understand it. But this is the part that I believe we don't really understand completely. For generations, for most of our lives, we were given a script, a very clear script. Do well at school, work hard and perform and follow the path, and in return, you will receive recognition, validation, a place in the world. In fact, a conditional promise of happiness. And we did not just follow that script, we became it. We built our identity around it so completely that for many people, the job isn't just what they do, it is who they are. So now remove the job and you don't just lose the income. Well, you lose yourself. And that is the crisis hiding underneath the economic one. And that is a spiritual crisis. But to understand what I mean really, maybe I need to take you somewhere. Not forward into the AI future, but back. Really back, back before your careers, back before your schooling, before the conditioning itself. Back to something more original and essential in each of us. Before the world told you who to be, there was a version of you that simply existed. Present, aware, open. And in that state, you receive experience through your senses, through your body, and through contact with the world around you. And between what you received and how you responded, there was a space, a living, conscious, essential space. And in that space, you didn't just process information like a machine, you explored it. You became curious about it. You connected it with something inside you. You gave it meaning. You interpreted what resonated and what did not. And from that place of genuine understanding, well, you created, you expressed, you manifested something that did not exist before. That is the fundamental human act, not the output, not the productivity, the lived conscious movement from experience to expression through a body and a self that are uniquely yours. That space, that is what makes us human. Okay, so now here is what happened to that space. Over time, with years, step by step, layers by layer, it got filled with values, cultures, religion, and social systems. And then we asked and often demanded that others organize themselves around those constructs. That conditioning began pouring into that very space we once used to explore experience freely. And some of it is fine. Some of it is aligned with who we genuinely are, but much of it created friction. A quiet, persistent distortion between who we are and how we are allowed to express ourselves. Into that friction came hurt and wound and trauma. And into that same crowded space came the relentless pressure of other people's expectation, their desires, and their projections onto us. Until one day, the space was full. And when the space is full, it demands no reflection. It demands no consciousness. It simply demands action, compliance, performance, output. And we became, without even realizing it, machines at the service of a system that didn't even know it had created us that way. We got busy. And busyness, in its truest sense, is exactly what it sounds like. The state of having no space left to think, to feel, to be. Business, busyness. Well, there is no accident in that word. And this is precisely where AI becomes so confronting, because it is stripping us of our busyness. If everything becomes accessible, if material abundance removes the necessity of work, well, we are left without our most reliable distraction. And what we find in that sudden stillness, it's not peace. What we find is everything we were too busy to look at. We find our conditioning, we find our trauma, we find our wounds. So, the anxiety that is rising around AI, my guess is it's not really about robots taking jobs. It's the anxiety of a person who has just been left alone in a room with themselves and does not recognize the person looking back. And so we ask the question, the most profound and shaking question in human experience: who am I? And this question really matters. But in that situation, maybe asking that question alone is not enough. Because when we look inward, asking who I am or who am I, we find only more layers. We find more conditioning, we find more noise, we find more wound, and we get lost in there if we don't have a therapist to work it out with us. And we need to be guided to a more useful question, the one this moment is actually inviting us to ask. And this is this: how can I express who I am in what I do? Through this body, through this life, through what the world life is offering me right now. How do I channel what is genuinely, originally me, mine? And this is not introspection, it is recognition. The recognition of a nature that was always there, waiting patiently beneath everything that was piled on top of it. So there is a kind of knowing that does not require long deliberation. And I think most of you have felt it. It feels like a compass, and it works like a compass. Not because you think your way to north, but because you feel it. There is a direction that simply resonates, a choice that simply feels right, a way of being that fits without forcing. And we all have this compass. The problem is that conditioning is magnetic interference. A trauma is noise. When the space inside us is cluttered with wounds and obligation and other people's stories about who we should be, well, the compass spins and we lose our bearing entirely. We follow the loudest voice instead of the truest one. So clearing that space through honest self-awareness, through therapy, through the courage to examine what we have been carrying, it's not a luxury in the age of AI. I believe it's becoming a necessity. Okay, so now Elon Musk's vision of abundance is about material. It's about cheap food, it's about accessible goods, and the elimination of scarcity. And perhaps that will come, and this is very good. But it is not the abundance that matters the most to humanity. The deepest abundance is not the ability to acquire. It is the freedom to create, genuinely, authentically, without the friction of conditioning putting you away from yourself. Without the fog of unhealed trauma distorting your vision. It is the experience of doing something and knowing in your body that it is aligned with who you are. And that specific alignment, it is not a mystical concept. It is one of the most concrete feelings available to human being. Or you know when it is present, and you know when it is gone, I'm sure. If you think about great art is not great because it is technically flawless. It is great because for one moment, one precise moment, someone found enough space between the noise to express something true, unique, something that opens a window into a possibility that wasn't visible before. That act of opening, we are all capable of it in our own specific ways, through our own specific brain, bodies, voices, and gifts. Human diversity is not incidental. It is the whole point. We are not meant to express ourselves in a unified, standardized way. Life offers us the same raw material, and we transform it into something completely different from one person to the next, through curiosity, through imagination, through awareness and presence. And that is the beauty the world needs. And it's the one thing AI cannot replicate, because replication is precisely what it is not. So let me tell you what I actually believe this revolution is asking of us. It is not asking us to learn a new skill. It is not asking us to pivot to a new industry. It is not asking us to outcompete a machine. It is asking us to become honest with ourselves, to do the slow, sometimes painful works of clearing out what was never ours to carry, to strip away the conditioning that does not belong to us, to heal what has been wounded, to do therapy to reclaim that original space, the space in which we can finally, clearly hear, feel, listen this compass. The key is not enlightenment, the key is alignment. And when what you are and what you do finally meet, without the resistance, without the distortion, without the friction of a self that was built for someone else's comfort, that is when abundance becomes something worth having. Not because you can finally buy what you want, but because you can finally create what only you could have created. And that is the revolution, not the one happening in the data center. This revolution is the one happening inside each of us right now, whether we are ready for it or not. So the only question is really, are we brave enough to stop being busy long enough to hear it?